everybody gets involved in who's president, who's vice president, who's running for this, running for that. It's the local and state that really affects you. I always believe, and I've been in politics for decades, run for office, served as city council member and vice mayor for 12 years of the city I live. If you don't have a seat at the table, you're part of the menu.
Hi, I'm Paul Giannamore. I wanted to welcome our new subscribers to the channel. You know, historically, Potomac TV has been focused on business and operational information and interviews for residential and commercial services business owners. But after the publication of the Sell-Side M&A Masterclass last month, my LinkedIn inbox has been inundated with a variety of different requests. So Dylan and I will be sitting down filming more extensive M&A masterclasses, both focusing on the sell side as well as the buy side. I intend to talk about the choice of process, delving deep into M&A psychology, as well as extensive buy side practice, approach, and due diligence. For those of you who have not subscribed, you can click below and subscribe to the channel. Furthermore, we've provided a link here in the description where you can get on our email distribution list. And if you do that, you'll receive an email right in your inbox with our latest publications. Feel free to put a comment below on the types of things you want to see. I mean, this channel is largely driven by you, the viewer, and what you want to see from us. Again, thanks for joining us here at Potomac TV. Mr. Dodson, thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate you asking.
So, Bert, you're out here at Pest World, and I understand you're going to be presenting an award tonight. Is it the Guardian Award? Is that accurate?
It's a really nice award that 5 people a year get it for the last 30 years. And it's very kind and gracious that the Crown Leadership Award has been given to 5 of us tonight, and we have an event. And it's a really testament for our family-owned company and the people who work for us, our team members.
I mean, I would say it's not a surprise that that's being given to you, even though there's only 5 people, given how much you've given back to the industry and your local community over the years. Why has that been important to you?
Well, first of all, they might have ran out of names, maybe. Okay. But I would say that it gives, after 80 years of being in pest control business since 1944, it really kind of stresses a family-owned company. As family-owned companies disappear from the pest control world by acquisition, et cetera, it's a real proud, and we have almost 700 team members, and I'm really proud of every one of them being part of the process.
Let's talk about that. So what year was your firm founded?
August 20th of 1944. My father was 18 and had an uncle who had previous pest control experience, came back from the war, and he was 29. And they formed a company called Dodson Brothers Exterminating Company. Another brother came in the late 40s, but my father bought him out in the mid-50s, if not the early 60s. So he had 95% of the company when he passed away in 1989. He had a brain tumor. Presently, my mother and my 2 sisters and myself own the company. So I work for a bunch of women. They have majority of the stock.
Is your mother active in the business?
No, she's on the board of directors. She's 98, and but she's very active as far as what we're going on. And if we do real well, she's very well appreciated throughout the industry and obviously our company. And we've grown a great deal for her and our 2 sisters, Karen and Bonnie, being leadership in the company.
So you've got over 700 team members. How many branches are you running that out of?
We have 38 offices in 6 states. We cover all of Virginia, West Virginia, North and South Carolina, and we have operations in Eastern Tennessee and Beltway, D.C. area.
And if you think about the last 10 years, how have you grown that? Has it been geographically out of Virginia, or have you operated in the periphery for a while?
Well, with 38 offices, we have 38 managers, and we have 4 regions. And we decentralize a lot of decision making. A lot of times when pest control companies grow, they don't have the management to grow. Yeah. So that's what we've done. We have regional offices in Raleigh, North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina, Richmond, Virginia, and Roanoke, Virginia. So we decentralize a lot of decision making, and it works out real well as far as people, sales managers and regional supervisors work under the direction of the regional managers, and it works out real well as far as the way we have grown the company. We do acquisitions, but what happens, we pick and choose which ones we want.
I mean, how have you seen the industry change in the last decade from a competitive perspective in your area?
Well, I would say, obviously, over the decades, I've been doing work since I was 15 years old. We always had Rollins and Terminix buying companies, and then you had some other big players. Obviously, Massey's grown a great deal. Arrow's grown a great deal. But, the private equity firms and come into the business only 10 plus years ago, that's really shaking things up. They pay a lot of money, okay, and people want to retire and move on, that's fine. But it's interesting that if anybody's got a good pest control business, has got some good customers and a good reputation, it's a seller's market.
Have you seen, when you think about companies that have partnered with the private equity firms, what are they like as competitors for you from a service perspective or dealing with your customers? How have you seen that? Have you seen those companies change?
Well, the private equity firms that employ pest control professionals do better than ones who just think pest control is another service. You think about it, how many companies have gone bankrupt in pest control over a number of decades? I don't know any.
The Terminix guys tried to break that thing for years and they never could, right?
Exactly. And in pest control, I tell new team members to come with us. It's a great business because it's you can't automate our jobs. You can't send them overseas. You have constant pest pressure, and you got people to pay for it. So that's a great combination. I've got a lot of friends that lost their jobs because companies have been sold, sent overseas. It's at bankers, have lost a lot of jobs. But pest control keeps on growing, and it's a great industry to be in.
When I think about a close personal friend of yours, Matt and Jay Nixon, right? They owned American. They partnered with Anti-Cemex, which is a private equity-backed firm. I mean, you look at, I think when Matt sold that business, it was maybe 12, 15 million in revenue, give or take. Now it's probably, I don't know, I'm guessing 60.
Well, I would imagine more than that. What they do, they buy companies as a platform, and then they buy other companies and put it on their platform. And then, but then they're going to sell the platform sooner or later. I mean, not Anti-Cemex, I guess, because they're obviously based in Stockholm, as Rentokil is based in London. But what occurs is that they're going to package them, work them for a while, and sell them off. That's what private equity firms do. It's the American way. I don't know if I agree with it, but it's the American way.
Have you ever heard from any of your regional managers or local managers about market share changes after a private equity platform comes into a region?
Well, it depends on the size of the area. For example, you take a large metropolitan area like Raleigh, North Carolina, Charlotte, DC, Richmond, Hampton Roads, for example. You don't hear about it that much. But if you take smaller markets and a private equity firm comes in and they don't keep the local talent and then they raise their prices, it's been very bountiful for us. And that's all I got to say on that.
Yeah, I imagine, the first part of their playbook is typically taking up prices drastically, which does create that nice pricing umbrella for you guys to come underneath, if that's part of the strategy.
I don't know what their strategy is, but it seems like they keep everything the same for a year. Then they start working people 6 days a week. We work 5 days a week. We got something to do on weekends, we do it. But what happens, and then they raise the prices 15 to 20%, and then customers start flowing to other pest control companies.
One of the things I'm really interested in, as you've grown that firm, how have you chosen new markets? What are the things that you look at when, you're like, hey,
a lot of our offices, we have operations in our area anyhow. And then what happened, we'll buy a company and we'll establish our brand, and then we'll grow from the brand. We do around 60% residential, 40% commercial. We have 145,000 accounts as of last week. We got 750 vehicles that we own, and 33 to 38 offices we own too. We're heavy into real estate and own our vehicles. But I think what happens, you got to understand the market as far as competition and as far as availability. You got some areas that we operate, the economy's not that good. You got some areas that it's really good. So you got to pick and choose and which ones you want to really expand in.
Can you tell us a little bit about that philosophy to own the real estate? That's what I'm interpreting from your comment, that you guys actually go in, buy the branch location, the actual physical property.
Yeah, what happens is that people don't want to rent to pest control companies. And we're different. We have around 90% of our pest control technicians come in every day, pick up the vehicle, and leave. And we do termite work too. I mean, we do liquid termite work. We got 61,000 termite renewals, for example. And we do fumigation work. So you got to have a base for that. So what happens, we have control of our people a great deal by coming in, pick up the vehicles rather than being detached all the time. And what happens as far as real estate, we own the property, so you're not paying rent. And we go in to invest in some areas we don't want to buy. You talk the DC area, it's pretty expensive real estate there. But I think what happens is that it gives us longevity and we can have control over our situation. I remember years ago, people give us 6 months notice to leave and try to find a place. So having our own place, own property, it works out real well. We don't have a separate corporation. Some people have a corporation they can funnel money to, but it's all within one corporation. And we need to make repairs, we make repairs. And don't have to go through a landlord.
Have you ever noticed that it might limit your flexibility on operations by actually owning the real estate? So for instance, you want to expand, but that location just can't handle the expansion. And so you have to go out and buy another property, for instance, when maybe it would have been nice to just be able to move without still continuing to own that real estate?
Well, we never admit defeat on anything. So what happens, we go to an area, we stay in the area. It's brand awareness. And it's a good question too. But if we ever want to pull out, we can make a lot more money by selling the property with the financial gain.
Let me ask you a question. A lot of the guys down in the southeast talk about, when you look at, for me personally, when I look at a southern company, they typically have more branches. The northern companies tend to have one big service center that does 20 million in revenue. Is there something to that in the South that folks like to be able to see the local shop in their town?
Well, for example, I live in Lynchburg, Virginia, which is around an hour south of Charlottesville and 2 hours west of Richmond, Virginia. I can count 13 offices within a 2-hour drive or where I sit in my office. So what I think having local presence, for example, we don't have phone banks. We don't have call service. People call us in our local office. We know where the location is. They talk with somebody on the ground. They're not calling a different state. So that gives you like hometown familiarity, and it works out real well for us.
Did you ever consider doing one centralized call center?
Zero.
Because you like to be able to, somebody calls in and it's next door to that supermarket and the lady on the phone knows exactly where it is.
And we detach, we have, out of the almost 700 people who work for our company, we have 80 full-time salespeople. So we can get to the immediate needs rather than have to go through several different branches or information.
From my understanding, people stick with you a long time, right? So your retention of employees, what I hear has been really high. Have you been able to accomplish that?
It's pretty simple. We care about people, care about us. And we have like 20 different incentive programs in the company, all the time, for every position. And if people don't care about us, they can be successful somewhere else. We're not a government agency just to hire people. But we incentivize people to do the right thing, and we have people. I just had a retirement party for a CSR that spent 45 years with us. We have a technician that's in Roanoke, Virginia. In Charleston, West Virginia, we have a pest control technician who's ran the same route for 50 years. He's 80 years old. He gets up so early in the morning that he makes the coffee for his customers so they get out of bed. Now, that work ethic is supreme. So I do a lot of retirement parties when people retire. I give them a nice bonus check and wish them the best. So I like people to come with us, grow with us, raise their families, retire. Now, people move around, don't get me wrong. But if they care about us, we care about them.
Could you expand on some of the incentive programs? So, has that always been a focus? Look, I'm personally a huge believer in incentives and think that they're typically underestimated by people, and that incentives, drive behavior. And so I'm just curious, has that always been a focus of yours?
Yeah, my father was very incentive driven. My father dropped out of school in 9th grade, a farm boy. So he worked his way up, and no college, not even high school education. And what I'm saying, he said, incentivize people. So we have, as far as we have like 80-some sales representatives, and they have different brackets and get different percentages. Now, there again, it comes at the end of the year, it drops down to the original percentage. Our technicians, many of them are on commission. They're not hourly. Now, some are hourly, but most of them are there. Our CSRs get a percentage of the collection in the office. So we have a different, every throughout company. And our company, which is family owned, we're basically, in most family owned companies, not to be critical, if the ownership gets a cut and everybody else gets a cut. We flip that rectangle whereby, or that a triangle, that everybody in each 38 officer gets a cut of the profit and the families at the end. So again, it's not just talk. We care about people, care about us.
I'm curious, I'm going to switch topics here for a second. If you think about the last 2 years and you think about residential and commercial, what have you seen on the customer demand side for resi versus commercial? Has that changed at all?
Well, that's a big, broad question. First of all, you got to define commercial. Is it high-end accounts, food processing plants, medical facilities, or is it convenience stores and banks?
Let's define it as you do in your business, whatever that is.
Well, we do a combination, and we do a lot of chain business, for our area. We were stockholders of Copasan for, a number of decades. And of course, obviously sold out to Terminex, a few years ago. But we do a lot of residential work too. What happens is that I think residential work is good money, but it comes and goes. People move around, people, et cetera. And commercial is a really good business to be in, but you gotta know what you're doing. We do a tremendous amount of food processing facilities, chicken processing facilities, large pharmaceutical plants. And we've worked out a real good angle there that's been very successful over the years.
So how is residential demand this year versus last year?
Our area is good. Well, during the pandemic, we thought things would go south. Well, they went north because people are at home and the like. And then what happens, people got back to work, et cetera. One thing is people just don't like living with roaches and mice and pavement ants and everything else under the sun. So I think what happens, there's a demand for residential. A lot of residentials last maybe 2 or 3 years. Some last 30 or 40 years. But I think what happens, if you base your business just on residential, you might have a down year. You might have a very cold season, depends where you're living at, and that hurts your business. By having a combination of commercial and residential gives you a better balance.
Do you know, is there any kind of cultural differences between the Carolinas and Virginia in dealing with customers?
That's another broad question. I think what has to do with more urban and rural. That would be a better answer. Urban, you got 30, 40 companies in the area. Rural, you may have 4 or 5. Yeah. And I think what happens, that's a big difference there. And of course, everybody wants service yesterday. And I don't care where they live, they want it yesterday. They don't want it tomorrow.
What are some things that you guys might do differently, at least in the eyes of the customer, versus some of your competitors?
That's another interesting question. I think what happens by them getting obviously on commission basis, they do good work and have to do we do mostly every other month service on residentials, of course, and of course in commercials as far as monthly. I think what happens is that caring about the people who do the work for us, and what happens is they have a built-in interest. We have trips for people, we have incentives, et cetera. We want people to be enthused about doing their job. And that gets down to the customers too. I had so many customers have told me, I really like your technician. I don't want a pest control problem, but I will call you back. People remember you. If you have a bad experience, they remember a lot longer. If you have a good experience, they'll call you back.
How much of your total business is termite versus general pest?
We do liquid treatments. We do have some accounts with bait, but that's very small. We're very Timberdor centric. We've been doing it for over 20 years. Of course, many years ago, it was chloridane, heptachlor, and aldrins. We remember those. So I think what happens as far as termite business, we do, I don't know what percentages off the top of my head, we do a lot of fumigation work too, for bed bugs. And obviously wood destroying insects. But termite, it depends on the area that we have. Some areas have light subterranean termite activity, some have heavy and like that. So it's been a very good business. What I've found, talking to other companies, more people are going to bait.
I was just going to ask you that. I'm seeing everyone go down. I was going to ask you why you haven't done that.
Well, first of all, I'm not a real big thing of bait. I'm from the school, and they've got 61,000 termite renewals. We had a lot of people stay for a long time. I think one thing as far as bait, and bait's got the pluses and minuses, and obviously we got areas that, and I don't go here and down bait, but you don't have the experience of training new technicians on liquid treatments. I've heard from people who say they go and stay in bait because they don't have the supervisors or the managers that got the longevity of training to train new people come in to do termite control with liquid.
I see. Go ahead, Matt.
So you're family owned, you've grown a lot over the years, and you have this incentive structure with profits being shared throughout the organization. I'm curious, as you've expanded and grown, have you balanced reinvesting in the business, in marketing and advertising, versus taking some profit out, for your family?
My father, excuse me. One thing I would say, we have been debt-free for decades. My father told me back.
That's the only way to go bankrupt, actually.
Exactly. That's a good way not to go bankrupt.
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
All right. He had a bank. He borrowed some money from a bank, and he came in every Friday to get his money. And we got huge company as far as pest control, obviously, and not have to worry about any debt works out real well. But what happens is that you make investment. If you're going to make investment in a business, and I just know pest control, I don't know anything else. I mean, some people do well in pest control. They go to other industries, other services, and they fail because they think they're very good in pest control. That happens over and over. But what happens is that if you invest in whatever you do in a company, you're not going to have a 1 or 2 year return. It might be 4 to 5 years down the road. Mm-hmm. And we got some very profitable and very large offices that 10, 12 years ago, they're just struggling. It's a long-term investment rather than a short-term investment. Did that answer your question, Nick?
Yeah. No, it does. I mean, it just seems like as the industry's evolved over the past 10, 20 years, you do have a lot of maybe, let's call them new school operators that invest everything and then some into growth in order to try to drive that top line as opposed to balancing profitability and growth.
Well, they might be increasing growth to sell. And then that worked. I mean,
Possibly.
Maybe it's like people just drive it up and go from sale like that. So, for example, what we do, when we look at companies, we want 3 years worth of federal tax returns. So you see pretty clearly if they try to grow it real fast to sell.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that. So you've done some acquisitions over the years, and is it largely to get into new markets?
It's where the deal is. And it might be a market where we're real strong, that somebody wants to retire, been knowing us for years. It might get into different markets too. We've done around 18 to 20 acquisitions last 12, 15 years. So we're active into it, but most of it's organic growth. And like,
what sort of things have you learned having done some acquisitions yourself?
Well, if they do termite work, they never had a claim. Of course, they never had a claim. Okay, they always say some of them. Well, you know how much money I really put in my pocket. I go, that's between you and the IRS. The IRS might be calling me tomorrow about this. Many other might you and the IRS. And the one thing too is that sometimes people who are good pest control operators if they don't have good accountants or lawyers, particularly tax lawyers, they kind of go into it blind. And that's when consultants, not trying to make you look good, Paul, what happens is come in and give them a true figure. Everybody thinks they got the gold nest, okay, to sell.
Everyone's got the best company out there.
Obviously, okay. Then you bring them down to earth as far as what they can get.
Have you had any of these deals turn bad after you bought them?
Never admit defeat, Bert.
Say what?
I said never admit defeat.
Yeah, exactly right. Some have turned out better than others, but we never regretted any of them. So we do a due diligence. We have people in our corporation that meet with individuals, and I meet with individuals. We talk. It's not a quick thing. Most of our deals go 4 to 6 months before we sign the papers.
It sounds like you've been very opportunistic in these deals. What's the environment like right now? Are you seeing deals come up?
Yes, but with the private equity firms coming in, the multiples they pay are just, very, very, it's good. Don't get me wrong. But what happens is that I think long-term companies like ourselves, we got to pick and choose, but we're not going to be in competitive with private equity firms because they're there to flip it. Yeah. They're ready to spend X amount of money and flip it in X amount of years. And that's the way things happen. I'm not being critical. That's the business plan. And they say anything different, they're not telling the full story.
They're just partners.
whatever they want and everything. I don't owe anybody anything, okay? The good Lord looks after me. I'm fine, okay? Paul, you got another question?
No, I was just thinking about it. Like what Nick said, you've really been opportunistic. It's like if there's opportunities that come up, it doesn't sound like, I mean, it sounds like you're focused on organic growth over acquisitions. And if you see the right thing at the right time,
it works out real well. Now, before private equity firms got into the business, there was more opportunity, obviously. But I think what happens is that we just want to, fit the right, and you got to have the management. You can buy a company, but you got to have the right management to ingrain into your existing company. And that works out real well.
In some of the territories you're in, you've got non-franchised Terminix operations.
Actually, we operate against 3 different franchises, and they are huge. Obviously, in North Carolina, South Carolina, and they are
part of Virginia, part of
Hampton Roads, Roads, Virginia. Exactly right.
But in the non-franchised territories, have you noticed any difference in post Rentokil Terminix? Have you gotten some great people from them?
Well, I'm really close to John Myers. I want to watch myself.
John's done a great job.
He has done a great job.
But integration things happen so I'm just curious.
Well, let's just say we've had a golden opportunity in the last few years, and we're taking full advantage of it.
I mean, look, it's only natural. You combine those organizations, good people are going to go. I mean, that's typically what happens.
Exactly, and customers too. If for whatever reason, it was a big integration they went through, and I know it was a lot of trial and error, but it's not my money; it's their money.
Yeah.
So, in terms of growth, how do you think about growth, and do you look at growth on, let's say, a 2, 5, 7 year basis when you're kind of budgeting out what your plans are?
Well, we have deposit. We use deposit goals as revenue and sales as new sales goals for each office each year. So we went on X amount of 5 to 7% growth a year, and that's good. You grow at 10, 15, 20%, which is great, but a lot of things not handled as they should be. We like consistent growth over a period of time, and we have around $4 million worth of monthly pest control. So that's $48 million right there. Yeah. So that gives you constant growth as far as growing up.
Yeah, and I imagine it really gives you the opportunity to manage the profitability at a healthy level with that type of growth. So,
well, our managers are very profit centric because 20 to 30% of their total income is based on the profitability of the office. So they're very engaged.
What have been some hard lessons you've learned over the years? You've been doing this a while.
Define hard lessons.
Business challenges that, you didn't necessarily have the solution for right away that took some time to overcome.
The pandemic was something. Obviously, we were essential workers, which was created, as you well know, in World War II. I think pest control operators and funeral home directors were excluded. We have a corporate office in Lynchburg, and we have 45, 50 people work out of the office. We never closed down a day. We never missed a day through the pandemic. It was really, everybody went through it. We had meetings constantly about how to deal with issues, and it was very challenging. When you have a big snowstorm, right now, and we have a major office in Western North Carolina. And I flew up to see them 2 weeks ago, and 25 team members, and sat down with each of them individually for 6.5 hours, saying we're not cutting anybody's job. We've got to rearrange a few things, bear with us, but you don't have to worry about your job. When the neighbor drowned the next day, the day before, or the house is gone. So what happens is that is something that tears your heart out as far as a natural disaster. And we have to rebound from that part. But it's like you got to have the perseverance to move on.
Yeah, I'm sure that had a tremendous impact, you going down there and having those face-to-face meetings with those team members.
Yeah, it was. I got to have our executive vice president, Pete Smith, who's wonderful for the company, and our regional managers. But I said, well, if I went to tell them face to face, a lot of them knew me already. You got a lot of hardworking team members in the office. They know that somebody's not coming back next week. Your job's lost. So we'll work through we do the best we can to look at the people the best we can.
What's it like having 3 women as your boss?
thank you, Mom. Thank you, sister. Thank you, sister. It works out pretty well. They're very
I have
engaged.
4 women at home, so I kind of know the feeling.
Well, yes, I married someone with 3 girls, and they didn't know my father, and they have a baby girl. I got 4 daughters, and adopted them. And it's interesting when you have women running your life. You got to work your P's and Q's. You got to watch your language too. Works out pretty well.
What, you're pretty involved in politics and pest control there in Virginia. What's the latest and greatest on the regulatory regime? How do you feel about that?
Well, I encourage all pest control operators to ignore the national stuff. I mean, everybody gets involved in who's president, who's vice president, who's running for this, running for that. It's the local and state that really affects you. I always believe, and I've been in politics for decades, and run for office, served as city council member and vice mayor for 12 years in the city I live. If you don't have a seat at the table, you're part of the menu. And to get involved with elected officials, whether Republican or Democrat, conservative, liberal, doesn't make any difference. Pest control is essential for the livelihood of all of Americans. And by working with them and showing the practicality of pest control services, you can gain a lot more than trying to be crazy about politics and like that. So it helps out a whole lot. I got 2 U.S. senators in Virginia, Tim Kaine and Mark Warner. I've been knowing 20, 25 years each. And we have pest control issues, like, for example, the Farm Bill. I'm dealing right now with this chief of staff of Tim Kaine. I had him come to the legislative function back in the winter. And they understand. So by having to be involved with them, then they can hear what's going on. Because if you don't have a representation at the state and the local and obviously the national level, you'll get eat up by the opposition.
And what is it about the Farm Bill that you're focused on?
Preemption. Okay, you don't want local localities to regulate you. You want the state to regulate you, fine. But like I live in Virginia, okay, I don't want Richmond and Norfolk and Newport News and Charlottesville, for example, to have their own legislation. Or North Carolina or Raleigh. You got to have centrality. And I think I worked out the preemption is a huge part of the Farm Bill that's coming out. As you can talk to J.D. Dar with the NPMA.
And where does it look like that issue is going to settle out?
Well, the Farm Bill is probably going to be handled next year. It's been extended for a period of time, but I think if more people get involved and show that our part of the Farm Bill, which is small but it's big to us, preemption part is a very essential part. Can you imagine running a pest control business and you got to deal with like 15 or 20 different localities? In our case, it'd be hundreds of localities. There's no way you can operate.
Yeah, I mean, we see that in the Northeast a lot. Like states like Maine will have different counties and municipalities with very, very different regulations with regard to what you can use, neighbor notifications, all sorts of stuff.
That's a good way. That's a good thing about living in Virginia. We don't have that. But I think what happens, you see what's happening. I think in Maryland has that, and a few other states, Connecticut, I believe, I'm not sure.
Yep.
But and actually, this U.S. senator from New Jersey is pushing not having preemption in the Farm Bill.
So what do you recommend folks in the industry do to get involved in that?
Pick out a good candidate, give them money, be there all the time they need them, and support them. Now, there again, I'm not a gambler, but back in politicians like betting on horses. You never can tell who's going to win, who's going to finish last. Yep. But I think what being involved works out real well. I know I got a number of Republican legislators in Virginia over the years have called, asked me. I'm a moderate Democrat, okay?
Which is rare in this industry, right?
Yeah, it's very rare, okay? I get it all the time. But the main one my father was, et cetera. What I'm trying to get to is that one thing nationally, if we all remember that we're all Americans first, and then we're Republicans and Democrats afterwards. Like I say, Virginia, we're all Virginians first, and then we're Republican, Democrat, or Independent. We get a lot more done. Getting off the political ring, it's like pest control is a great essential business. It's been here for decades. It'll be here for decades after this, and we have to take care of our customers because the rats, the roaches, the mice, the fire ants, they're not going anywhere. And the bed bugs, they came back to haunt us, around 20 years ago. So we part of the business. We're not evolving business, but what happens? We're not a dead business. We're a very alive business.
Anything else on that regulatory front that keeps you up at night?
Well, first of all, nothing keeps me up at night. So I still coming here and worrying about what the questions you're going to ask. Not too much. Just got to, obviously be in control. But if you're not in control of your own self and have people control you from the political part or the legislative part, then you're at a disadvantage.
Do you ever worry about the economy or inflation as it relates to the business? Or is that another area in that area where just
inflation has hurt all of us. Yeah. I mean, you look at it, and I went to business school at the University of Richmond, so I learned a long time ago, no matter who's president, it has no control over inflation. There's less demand due to the pandemic, so inflation was down. But a war starts in Ukraine by an aggressor, and then what happens? The oil prices increase. But I think right now the inflation's gone down. But it's now we don't borrow money either, so don't have to worry. We care about obviously rates being to a lower percentage. But I think what happens is that you got to build that inflation part. Now it's another thing about price increases too. People in our industry got to look at price increases. You cannot charge the same thing you were 5 to 7 years ago. If you do, your profitability will shrink and your net worth of your company will shrink too.
Yeah, especially when wage growth is around over 4% right now, just as a country.
One thing, now I'm not an economist, but you're paying people more to do the same amount of work you were 5, 6 years ago. So that has a big part of inflation.
What's gotten easier as the company has gotten bigger?
Now that's a good question. You're always going to have an issue, and you can't stay up at night worrying about every issue. If you worry too much, you'll be counterproductive. But the bigger you are, the more susceptibility you have as far as big issues that will consume you. I don't know if that makes any sense, but what happens, the bigger you are, the more you got to worry about what's going on. I don't know if that makes any sense at all.
That makes some sense. Have you all been able to use your size to your advantage in order to have a more sustainable business, increase retention, or grow at a faster rate?
Well, I won't get into all the details, but by buying 50 to 70 vehicles a year, we have certain vendors we work with, so they know the money is going to get paid on them. Dealing with vendors as far as tomato side and other products, we buy we commit a year in advance. So, and we pay our bills on time. We have a very high rating as far as the Better Business Bureau, and we have a very high rating as far as Chamber of Commerce. So it works out real well that we pay our bills. One thing about running a business, you pay your bills. If you get a reputation not paying your bills, people won't work with you.
I imagine it's helped your brand awareness as well. Is that something you all focus on? Yes,
actually, yellow is our color. We have 760 vehicles thereabouts, I was saying, all of them painted yellow. Our technicians have yellow shirts and billboards. We're big in big boards, billboards, rather. Baseball stadiums, particularly on highways, interstates. So yellow is our color, and it works out real, yellow and red. It's a brand awareness that we have.
Bert, I want to close out this session asking you, you've been at this a long time. What sort of advice do you have to some of the younger folks out there who are kind of early on in their journey in building a business?
Nothing happens overnight. Pay your bills, work hard, believe in your people, don't get frustrated, and just appreciate the business that you have. I think sometimes people want the quick fix. They want to make the quick dollar. You will make money, but it takes a period of time. But be open to criticism. Don't take it personally. And the bottom line is that what you put into something, you'll get back. I believe that the harder you work, the luckier you'll get.
Mr. Dodson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Nick. Paul, it's been a very pleasure.
Bert.